When there is no distance between who you are in private and who you are in public, there really is no capacity for embarrassment. If you're not concealing something about yourself that you're hoping others will not notice, you're not trying to foist any illusions on people about you, but you're simply just of a piece and living your life.
This book I read entitled Lying is fascinating, especially the basic premise, which reeled me in right away, is that we often behave in ways that are guaranteed to make us unhappy. And lying itself is so common, people do it without even thinking. We don't even know what life would be like without it. And some of the analogies are quite brilliant. We wouldn't want a car that told us we don't need gas when we really do, just because we're too lazy to stop. So why would we want that in our lives? And yet this is what most people seem to be doing.
Yeah, well, where it gets controversial is on the topic of white lies. So most people acknowledge that there's a problem, or at least a potential problem, with lying in general, where you're the head of a company and you're lying about your financials, you're engaged in a fraud, you're Lance Armstrong and you're taking steroids and you're having press conferences and lying about it and lying about your teammates and, suing them to shut them up when they tell the world that you're lying. And so it's like all of that seems pathological, and most people recognize that that's worth avoiding if you can at all help it. But they nevertheless reserve the right to lie on all these other occasions where they think it's actually a good thing to do and a compassionate thing to do and a thing that is actually improving their relationships rather than undermining them. They call these white lies. So much of the book is, as you know, is purposed toward arguing against this very notion of a white lie. I think if you look closely at the circumstances where you think you are doing yourself or anyone else a favor by misleading another person about what you actually believe to be true, you're not. And you can discover that what you're doing is quite obviously motivated by an interpersonal fear with that person, and you're in some sense ramifying that fear and allowing your relationship to conform to it. Whenever you're found out, you're diminishing the trust in the relationship, the trust that the other person could possibly have in you, even if they were consoled by your white lie when you told it. One of my favorite examples in the book, I released that book as an ebook first. It was just a very short hardcover book, but initially it was just a PDF that I released. And then I got reader feedback. I had readers tell me their stories about lies that had misfired for them and the price they had paid for lying or the lies of others in their lives. And one story that came in, which I used in the subsequent edition of the book, was of two women who were out to lunch, and one said to the other, brought up a third friend, and one said, "Oh yeah, I'm supposed to see her tonight, but I just can't do it. I'm so busy. I don't want to go out. I'm going to call her and just tell her I can't go out tonight." So in the presence of her friend, she gets on her phone, calls this third person, and gets her voicemail and just lies about why she can't have dinner that night. She says something about her kids being sick or whatever in the presence of this other friend. And so now this story was delivered to me by this friend who just watched her friend lie with just perfect alacrity to a friend at kind of at the same level, and recognized in that moment that it just subtly but rather fatally diminished her trust in her friend. I mean, she just wondered immediately, she couldn't help but wonder how often she had been on the receiving end of that kind of treatment. What was so insidious about this is that it was not the kind of lie, nor was it the kind of friendship that required that she say anything. So she never communicated that she perceived this to be an ethical problem or this had harmed their relationship. And so the person who was lying never knew that she had just sort of lost a friend to some degree. I mean, all of this is just so corrosive and so uninspected by most people. And so that's where the book focuses. So the commitment to telling the truth, it's definitely not the commitment to being totally uncensored and lacking in all tact. I mean, it's not like you need to become a Tourette's patient and just blurt out whatever's on your mind. It's not to say that that is actually the phenomenology of Tourette's syndrome, but that's the cartoon version of it. But it's a commitment to saying what's true and useful. The filter is true and useful. And there are certain circumstances where you I think are wise to worry. First of all, there is no whole truth. I mean, you can't say everything you think about anything. You'd be there forever, right? So you're always picking and choosing things to say. And there are circumstances where I would admit that a slightly more paternalistic view of the person you're talking about is relevant. So that if you're talking to a child, if your 7-year-old asks you, what is ISIS? You don't have to immediately start telling her about all the decapitations happening in the Middle East. There's a reason to edit the truth, and it doesn't require any lying. It just requires that you see that there's certain, blanks on the map that are not appropriate to fill in for a 7-year-old. And there are grown-ups who occasionally have to be treated like children, but we should recognize that that's in fact what we're doing. If you think someone really can't handle the truth about their life, you think this person's going to commit suicide if you tell him that, that his wife is cheating on him, or that you didn't like his novel or something, well, then you have to acknowledge that you're dealing with someone who you think, rightly or wrongly, is not a fully competent interlocutor. I mean, this is somebody who you are protecting from himself. Those are really unique circumstances when you're talking about adults. I mean, far more often, we're just uncomfortable communicating what is true because we don't think it makes us look very good. It puts us in an awkward situation. And so we're protecting ourselves, or imagine we're protecting ourselves. We're not giving the other people, in many cases, an honest look at what our situation actually is and what our relationship actually is and what they can expect from us in the future and the kinds of friendships we want to have with them. And there's a mismatch between their expectation and what, in fact, you intend to do the next time you're in a room with them. So if someone's sending you emails about, wanting to get together for lunch, and you just simply don't want to have lunch with this person, and you don't want this kind of relationship with this person, and you don't even like this person, and they don't know it, right? I would grant you that there are more and less tactful, more and less polite ways to resolve that situation. But the thing that most people do is they just punt. They tell a white lie. They say, I'm just really busy this week. Sorry, I just can't do it. And then, you get an email from that person next week. At a certain point, you either have to confront this, or you just keep making up more elaborate lies and hope they get the point. If you want to live your life with integrity, just look at what integrity means. Integrity is a closeness of fit between what you will say to someone's face and what you will say about them when they leave the room. If there's a real distance there, one, you're not a good friend, if that person is in fact your friend, but also you're a scary person for others to be around. We've all been this person. We've occupied each one of these roles. You know what it's like when someone leaves the room and the people who are left immediately start talking about them. When you see someone say something that there's no way they would say that in the presence of the person who has left, you know that this person is advertising to you something about themselves, I think diminishes your trust of them. What are they saying about you behind your back? And yet the person who's dishing now about the other person is rarely aware that this is in fact what's happening. They're rarely aware that they are advertising their capacity to, stab others in the back. I mean, there are many people who I will say terrible things about because I think terrible things about them, but I will also say these things to their face. I've worked very hard to do that. I can't say that honestly there's no difference between how I would speak about someone to their face and behind their back, but there's much less difference than there ever has been in my life. And certainly there's much less than I see in the lives of others. And there's an immense power to that. You can be overheard by anyone and be unembarrassed. And it also forces you to confront your mind as it actually is. I mean, if you're a petty, judgmental, self-serving asshole, forcing yourself to be honest with other people holds a mirror up to that side of your life very, very quickly. If the truth about why you don't want to go out with someone, right, is that you only want to date people who are 15 years younger than yourself and look like they're, fitness models, well, that's a truth you have to confront if you don't give yourself the out about lying. If you can't have recourse to, well, sorry, I just don't feel like being in a relationship now, whatever the lie is, it's something that you actually do have to confront about yourself, whereas the liar need, in fact, never even notice it or never see its implications. When there is no distance between who you are in private and who you are in public, there really is no capacity for embarrassment. If you're not concealing something about yourself that you're hoping others will not notice, You're not trying to foist any illusions on people about you, but you're simply just of a piece and living your life, honestly representing your views and willing to talk about anything. That's a kind of superpower. It's just so rare. Again, I certainly can't say I've perfectly achieved it. I know what the bullseye looks like, and I know when I land in it, and I know when I land just outside it. And, just as a matter of ethics and a matter of just personal growth, I think it's useful to become less and less comfortable with one's own duplicity, being two-faced and saying the thing to the person's face and having something very different to say when they leave the room. All of those dichotomies, ultimately, I think we should find them intolerable. There's a lot of strength that comes from that. Just to go back to something you just said, though, about making it easier for yourself and easier for the other person in the moment, it's worth lingering on just the conception of easier for the other person for a moment, because it's often making it easier in the sense that you're telling them what they want to hear or telling them something more pleasant than is in fact what's true. But you might also be causing them to waste a tremendous amount of time or encouraging them to waste a tremendous amount of time where you could be helping them to get their life on track in a way that other people around them aren't. So the classic example for me is when someone asks you to give your opinion of their book or their screenplay or something they've been working on. So let's say you read their book and you think it's terrible. Obviously, it'd be much more convenient for both of you if you read their book and you thought it was great, because then you can say it was great and then you feel good and they feel good and your friendship is intact and there's no problem. But if a friend of yours comes to you with something they've spent a lot of time working on and you think it's terrible, if you think you're helping them by sparing them this momentary discomfort of you not supporting their rosiest conception of themselves, I think you really need to look more closely at that, because I've been on both sides of this. And I can tell you that the people who didn't give me honest feedback or just didn't have good critical feedback to give were far less helpful to me than the people who said, listen, you have to tear this thing down to the studs. This is awful. You're lucky only I saw this. Other people who aren't their friends are not going to spare them their criticism. The way to think about it in these cases of creative work, what you're doing for your friend is this thing is not yet out in the world, right? It's a different circumstance when it's out in the world and there's nothing they can do about it. Then you're having a different conversation, which is arguably harder. But if you're still in a position to give them some help by giving them honest feedback, then you really should give that feedback. And you can always give it in a way that acknowledges that it's just your opinion. You're not omniscient. You're not the ultimate arbiter of what is good in the world. But if you have an informed opinion and you have reason to think that other people are going to share your view of the things they're getting wrong, well, then you should really just be candid. And if the person you're dealing with is at all an adult and actually wants to be spared future embarrassment, well, then they're going to be grateful for your candor. And they're actually going to find the friends who just glad-handed them and sent them on their way totally useless. It's always interesting to look back on the praise one received for things that one now thinks were terrible. Imagine you've got two friends. You're doing something you really hope is going to be great. You show it to two friends, and the first friend tells you, oh, everything that's wrong with this, and it's going to take you a lot of effort to make it right, but you got to get in there and do it because in its present form, this thing is terrible. And you wind up agreeing with him, right? And you do the work and you make all those improvements. But you have this other friend who saw your first draft and said, I think it's great. That person is far less valuable to you in that capacity. And it would be an irony if the person was simply lying to you, thinking he was going to spare you some discomfort.
Once you've been in business long enough, you will realize how much of business is about trust. And it's about trust because you want to compound interest. You want to be able to work for long periods of time with trustworthy people without having to reevaluate every discussion, without having to rethink each time, and without having to constantly look over your shoulder. And so over time, you gravitate towards working with certain kinds of people. And similarly, those people will gravitate towards working with other ethical, quote unquote, people. So being ethical turns out to be a selfish imperative. You want to be ethical because it attracts the other long-term players in the network. And then they want to do business with you. And if you build a good enough reputation for being ethical, eventually people will pay you just to do deals through you, because you're the one who will validate and ensure the deals by your presence, because you wouldn't be involved with low quality stuff. So being ethical actually pays off in the long run, but it's the very long run. In the short run, being unethical pays off, which is why so many people go for it. It's a greedy algorithm. But you can be ethical simply because you're long-term greedy. And I can even outline a framework for different parts of so-called ethics just based on the idea of long-term selfishness. For example, you want to be honest because it leaves you with a clear mind. You don't have two threads running in your head. One is the lies that you told you to keep track of, and the other one is what you're saying. You just have to think about one thing at a time, so you have more energy to think about that thing, so you're a clearer thinker. Also, by being honest, you're rejecting the people who only want to hear the pretty lies, so you force those people out of your network, and sometimes it's painful, like friends and family, but long term, you create room for the people who like you exactly the way that you are. So that is a selfish reason to be honest. For example, in negotiations, if you're the kind of person who always tries to get the best deal for yourself, you will win a lot of very early deals and it'll feel very good. But on the other hand, there are a few people who will recognize that you're always scrabbling and not acting fairly, and they will tend to avoid you. Over time, those people end up being the deal makers in the network because people go to them for a fair shake or to figure out what's fair. And so if you are cutting people fair deals, you don't get paid in the short term, but in the long term, everybody wants to deal with you, and you end up being a market hub. You have more information, you have trust, you have reputation, and people end up doing deals through you. A lot of wisdom is just realizing the long-term consequences of your actions. And so the longer term you're willing to look, the wiser that you're going to seem to everybody around you.
My takeaways are the following. If you want to build a long-lasting, healthy relationship, avoid lying. Always give honest feedback, especially when you're in a position in which your opinions can help someone to improve. Self-esteem is just the reputation that you have with yourself. You will always know. Play long-term games with long-term people. All returns in life, whether in wealth, relationships, or knowledge, come from compound interest. Naval, Ravikant. Few delights can equal the mere presence of one whom we trust utterly. George MacDonald. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the written content in this video, you will love our newsletter, where you can get in your email all the written content plus the latest things that I've been pondering. To subscribe, always for free, find the link below in the description.